Hey there, welcome to the podcast today. We are doing a fun thing. We are co hosting today's episode as we're going to be sharing all the tips and tricks about how to homeschool through all the ages and the stages through elementary and middle school and high school and beyond. So, to get things started today, I'm actually going to kick it over to my co host and let her introduce herself.
Thank you, Katie, for this. This is going to be so much fun. I feel like we have so much in common, and I love getting homeschool moms together. But my name is Leigh Nguyen, and I podcast over at Little by Little Homeschool. I have been homeschooling. Well, we actually just finished up our 13th year of homeschooling, and I have three children, two that have graduated. I have a 21-year-old and a 19-year-old, so two young adults, one that lives at home still and one that does not. And I am homeschooling my final kiddo, and he is 16. So we're going into, oh my goodness, into his 11th and 12th grade year. So into 11th grade. So I've got 2 more years to go. And I've been married to my husband for 23 years, and we've been homeschooling almost since the beginning, but it's been such a blessing. So thank you. So share a little bit about yourself, Katie.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, I am so excited to kind of pick your brain and learn from your wisdom, Leigh, because you're just a few steps ahead of me with your kids' ages. So I'm Katie Hedrick. I'm host of the Joy at Home podcast and a homeschooling mom of three. Mine are 10, 13, and 16. So just a little bit younger. And we were a public school to homeschool family. We absolutely love it and we would never go back. It truly has been the best decision that our family has ever made. And I have grown to become so passionate about it that I absolutely love helping other moms step into homeschool and to be able to navigate that journey because it's just unspeakably good. There aren't enough words to describe that. Even though you may have some rough days when you're homeschooling, you are going to have a million wonderful days and wonderful moments and make such a significant impact in your children's lives. So it's such a good thing. With all that being said, we're excited to jump right in and share some of these tips and tricks with you. Leigh, let's start with talking about some tips for teaching elementary age students. So you've been there, you've done it all and seen it all. Let's hear some of your best tips for teaching those younger age kiddos.
It's so hard to compile so many years into just a couple of tips, but I was sitting there thinking, how can I just kind of whittle this down? And what are the basics? Because we can get so caught up in all of the details and all of the big things and little things as homeschool moms. So my first tip would be to just that you just have to stay one step ahead of them. And not even all the time. When it comes to their curriculum and the resources and whatever plans that you have, it's just staying one step ahead because we often start to homeschool. We think, how am I going to teach physics or how am I going to teach trigonometry? And I'm like, no, no, no. We're teaching them how to count. We're teaching them how to add. You're still in the elementary years. Let's just focus on that and just staying one step ahead. That doesn't mean you even have to stay more than a day ahead. Or sometimes I found myself just kind of skimming over a lesson just right before I was going to present it to them. And that is enough. And sometimes it was me just doing the lesson through at the same time as them and learning how to explain, say, mathematical, since I'm describing math and stuff, how to explain mathematical concepts. So most of the time, stay one step ahead of them when it comes to your formal curriculum and your formal academics. But then also balance that with being flexible with the things that they want to learn about, because homeschooling is an entire lifestyle. Let's make learning a lifestyle. And if they have a question about something that they see, most of the time with elementary age range, they will see things, especially a lot of science outside. You take a walk, whether it's a nature walk, or you just go for a walk somewhere, or you're driving in the car and you see a horse, and they will just like something will pop into their head. Answer that question. And there is good old Google. There is no reason to not figure out things and to get the answers. But I just found just staying just one step ahead of them was how I felt like I was going to meet their needs. And then there was times where I was like, you know what? I don't know. Let's look this up. And sometimes I couldn't even find the answer. Or I would say, let's ask so and so, because that's always a great resource too. If you have a neighbor or you have a friend from church or just friends, their own friends, parents who know something about something that you don't quite know, it's great to be able to make those connections. So that would be my main tip, to stay one step ahead. How about you, Katie?
I'm so encouraged by that, Leigh, because I feel like we're really in alignment. So when we first started homeschooling, I was definitely in that place of I have to have it all figured out. I have to know what they're going to be studying and I have to have the high school transcripts done. And then I was like, reality hit me. Hey, your child is in third grade. So I think that one step ahead and learning right alongside them is such a great tip. I had just made a note to talk about foundations, which is really in alignment with what you were just talking about. When your child is young, you really want to focus in on those just core foundations. So, foundations in faith and core values, and helping your child to understand, your family values, the things that you find important and why they're important, and just instilling those into their heart. Foundations in faith and foundations in good relationships and friendships and how to interact with people. One thing I love about homeschool is that the kids are not tied down to only interacting with kids their own age, right? They're learning how to interact with people of all ages and stages, and they're able to spend time with, whether it's a co-op group and there are lots of other children there, or maybe you're visiting the local nursing home or even their own grandparents, and they're exposed to this whole gamut, and they're learning these formative, methods for creating and building and nurturing good relationships. And so I think from the very get-go that just foundations and those things are so important. And just like you said, Leigh, our number one job as the mother of a young child is to instill in them a love of learning. It's to teach them to love the process of learning, not that we have to have it all figured out or that we have to have all the things learned right now, but rather to just love the process of learning and love finding out what they're interested in, and as they get older what they're passionate about, and kind of bunny trailing down those things when they're younger and just letting them investigate, and yes, looking things up on Google and looking things up on YouTube. The other thing I wanted to mention, which you also mentioned, was just nature as a teacher. When our kids are young, I think they need to be outside. Think they need to put their feet in the grass. I think they need to find little bugs and little things with wings and tadpoles and things that can really spark their curiosity. And I think that nature can be such a wonderful teacher. And I really think that nature can hold their attention a lot longer than, say, curriculum, a really structured curriculum. Now, reading and read aloud, I think, is a little bit different situation. And I think that that is a great way to actually foster that love of learning and those foundations in some of those core subjects. So I think focusing more on just investing time with them, intentional time with them, teaching them to love learning and reading aloud to them are probably some of the best things that are going to help during those young formative elementary years.
That is such a good mindset. And as you're talking, I'm thinking to myself, when you're trying to decide how to spend your time and with the outside, maybe make a goal, especially when we're in the summer right now, we're going to the year. And when the weather's nice, spend more time outside than inside for the kids. And obviously, you want a safe environment. I remember my kids were younger in the elementary age range. We moved to their house. And when we were looking at this house to purchase it, I stood in the backyard and I just cried because it was all fenced in. It gave them so much lawn, it gave them so much area. And I knew that they would be safe. And I could see them from the kitchen and I could cook dinners, I could cook lunch and then call them in. And it was perfect. So just having that time. So it doesn't even always have to be going somewhere. It's just if you have some space, even if it's not a big yard, just having some space for kids to be outside is good. And you can bring those real louds outside too.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's such a great point. My boys love to ride their bikes while we're doing read aloud, outside, and it is such a gift. I don't take it for granted. We're on a farm here in the Midwest and we have a pond and lots of space, and I don't take that for granted that the kids have nature right outside their door. But like Leigh said, if whether your yard is small or even if it's just going to the local park, definitely, take the time to do those things with your kids. Nature is one of my favorite teachers. Even as an adult, I feel like I still learn so much just by putting my feet in the grass and looking up at the sky, daytime, nighttime, stargazing, whatever it is. It just kind of sparks that curiosity and wonder and joy, for all of us, I feel like. Let's move into that middle school age. Oh my goodness. These years are wonderful, but they can also be challenging because our kids are there's so many changes happening inside of them in so many different ways with their minds, with their bodies, with their personalities, with their interest. They're trying to kind of, test the waters and gain their independence. They're maybe, on the front end of starting to drive or learning how to drive. I know it's 14 years old here where we are in Iowa that they start doing driver's ed. So there are so many things happening in middle school. So Leigh, how do you feel about that?
I completely agree with all that. There's just so much. There's this tension too, where they want to be more independent, and especially if they have older siblings, if they are younger and they have some older ones that they're watching go through homeschool and getting their independence. My youngest is he just wants his independence at this point because he sees his older brother and his older sister, and we do not drive in New York at 14. It's 16. So,
Yes.
if I told him that, he'd be like, "Let's move to Iowa."
Oh my
Would you
gosh.
say Iowa? Yeah, let's move out west. We But yeah, there's just that there's hormones and there's just so many different changes, and there's sometimes more sleep that needs to be needed, and there's just maybe more emotions, and again, this depends upon the child, but I found that during the middle school years, there was never a time that I never regretted taking some time to get their input and to study them also. Because at this age, they'll kind of give you some input, but they don't always know what their natural bent is or what they're really interested in. They're still there's so much going on in their brain, and they're flooded with hormones. There just is a lot of confusion and trying to figure out the world in a different way. And so they don't even know themselves as well as we know them, and we get to watch them. And so studying them gives us a glimpse into some possible areas of study academically, or it could be just something that you see that they're doing and you want to take it to another level, and they don't realize sometimes that these are a possibility. And they're like, "Oh, you mean I could do more of that for homeschool?" And so I just found that getting their input when it came to especially things like science, what do you want to study? Because a lot of times
Yes.
in the younger
Yes.
years, they're like, "Well, I want to study animals." It's always some type of animals, and we're doing all the mammals and the marine biology, all the stuff in an elementary age range, and then saying, "What do you want to study in middle school?" And they might say something like chemistry, but they just want it from like a middle school kind of range. And so just asking them, getting their input, especially for some things that it really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what exactly you study for science or history. And there are years where you're saying, well, we haven't quite studied certain time periods for history, and I really want to do that. But finding then a curriculum or resources or books that they will then really learn from well, and that living books and things that will make them excited to continue to learn that. So I just found that it was a great way for us to form a connection by asking them, getting their input, and you can do this in the younger years too, but they kind of usually are a little bit more flippant about what it is. They become a little bit more passionate and really giving over the reins a little bit more to them and giving them more freedom when it comes to the middle school years, and then checking and just making sure that they're actually doing what they need to do, and working alongside them. But yeah, it just is kind of fun to be able to study them and present them with materials and resources that oftentimes they don't know is even available. And that will then take that love of learning that you were mentioning earlier to another level. It gives them the responsibility a bit more.
That is such a great age and stage, I feel like, because before they hit high school, and then you're kind of like worrying about the transcripts and if they're going to go to college, you want to make sure and get all these certain classes and do all these things. But those middle school years, exactly like you said, you can really dive deep into their interest. I know last year for us, my middle child, my son, was in seventh grade and he loves the national parks. That's something that him and I love. And we go visit the national parks often as a family. It's something that we love to do together. And so he actually, for part of his science, we had studied earth science the first half of the year. And then he kind of jumped off and dove deep into the national parks the second half of the year. And so for them to be able to kind of pursue their interest before you're really tracking, credits and classes, I think that's just incredible. It's one of the many opportunities that come with homeschooling. That's just so great. I think hand in hand with that is just this concept of teaching the child and not necessarily the curriculum. I think that those go hand in hand, really just connecting with their heart, connecting with their interest, and talking about the hard stuff. We talked about all these changes that are happening within them. I think it is so important as moms that we address those hard topics as their bodies are changing, that we as parents are the one to have those conversations with them. I know just this morning I'm getting ready to take my son, the middle schooler, for his sports physical for the upcoming school year. And some of the things that are being pushed down in the recent years from government that are now being pushed onto our children, and questions that they're asking our kids and things that they're talking about. I feel very strongly that it is the parents' place to have those conversations. And it breaks my heart because I know there are kids out there that their parents are not having those conversations. And so, the medical professional, it is needed in that situation. But as a parent who feels like it's important to have those conversations, it kind of breaks my heart because, of course, my son and I have had those conversations. But again, I just feel like, hey, we need to talk about these things before you have this medical professional pushing their ideology on you and how they feel about those things. Like, this comes back to our family's core values, and our beliefs and our faith and what the truth is about these things. And those middle school years, again, they're so formative because they're kind of figuring out and deciding, who they are and what is most important to them and what they value. And, mom and dad play a big role in that. Our beliefs play a big role in that. And it is our job to speak the full truth to our kids. So I would just encourage the moms to have those really hard conversations, even if it's awkward, even if it's uncomfortable. It's one of those things that it's our privilege to get to do that with our middle schoolers.
And I think this time that we have with them really helps the relationship so we can have those conversations. I remember growing up and not really having those conversations with my parents. And I'll be honest and say that I felt awkward when I began having those conversations with my kids. But I was like, no, I want to be the one to do that. And so we can feel kind of silly. I just remember the first time I was like, don't giggle and don't laugh. Like, how ridiculous is that? I'm
Yeah.
in my 30s and I feel inadequate to do this. And I was like, just take a deep breath. And the more that I had those conversations, I still have conversations with a 21-year-old and 19-year-old. And sometimes they're like, Mom, we know you don't need to bring that up again. I'm like, well, I just want to make sure, that everything we can talk about everything. And so having that starting at that age, I mean, even younger, obviously, you're talking about body parts and things and answering questions, but being okay to answer all the questions and having that relationship where they can come to you. So I love that you have that with your kids, and it won't ever end. They'll continue to ask you questions, and even if it feels awkward. And there's so many great resources out there too, and always saying things like, this is what the doctor, or this is what's going to be presented to you. What do you think about that? And let's look and let's go back to the Bible. What does the Bible have to say about that as well? What does our faith say about this situation? And it's totally worth the awkwardness at the time. And if anybody's listening and you're feeling awkward and kind of uncomfortable, push through that, because they will be so much more equipped, and they will be able to then verbalize their reasons why they believe in a certain thing, or why they stand on a certain truth.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have no doubt that our kids are going to look back with gratitude that we did have those conversations with them. And how incredible that we get to kind of change the legacy. If regardless of what our relationship was with our parents and whether they talked about the hard things with us or not, it's kind of water under the bridge. Our job is here and now. As the mom, we've been trusted with our kids, and we can do different. We can do better. And I think that's wonderful and encouraging. That springboards us into those high school years. Oh my goodness. Again, these can be challenging, but really fun. And it's so interesting as the kids kind of make a jump. I don't know that I would necessarily say to where they become your friend, because you're still parenting them, and there still needs to be, the discipline scenario and all of that aspect, but it's different. I feel like it's different when they get into high school, and you kind of relate on a different level, and you spend time intentionally together doing things that you maybe both enjoy kind of side by side. And you've spent this time pouring into your kids, and equipping them. And yeah, it's an exciting age and stage. So let's hear your thoughts, Leigh, on those wonderful high school years.
I agree. And it's fun as they get older and they actually get jokes and you can joke around about things and you can, like you said, go and do things that you think are fun and that they think are fun. And you can just have more of a good time. And that relationship is built through all of those years. So during the high school, my goal has always been so now I live in New York. It's a pretty strict homeschool state, which is fine. It is what it is. I know some states are very loose and this is where I am. So I'm going to have to deal with it. And so I look at the requirements we have, which are fine requirements. They're not asking us to do anything that's most homeschool moms aren't going to do anyway. But my goal is to get most of that gen ed, most of the bulk of that you're going to see on their transcript done in the first 2 years. And it's just been my approach to it. And my kids in the first 2 years are like, "Whew, this is a lot." I'm like, "I promise you, there is a light at the end of the tunnel." And then we get to 11th and 12th grade, and there's the 4 years of English language arts that are needed, but I get to then spend so much time with them, more time with them doing electives and maybe apprenticeships and really spending time on what do they want to pursue. And that doesn't mean that's what they're going to do when they get out of their formal high school years, but it's giving them exposure to different things. And I have found that my kids have very specific areas that they're interested in. And as the parent, you don't have to know all the answers to all those things. If I look at any of those three specific areas, my daughter was really into, I mean, I enjoy gardening, but she got more into gardening and farming and natural health. And we're able to really connect her with that, which is fun. And then my son, who is 19 now, got into entrepreneurship. And with doing the podcast, we've been able to connect over a little bit of entrepreneurship. But I don't know everything that he knows. He knows so much more. And then my youngest is really into videography and drones and photography. And I know some of that, but it's really cool when your kids excel in an area further than you. And it's really neat to see and to learn from them. I will ask them questions about things. I'm like, "Oh, I didn't know that." And so that's also a part of the relationship. So really my biggest tip would be to get done what you need to get done, but allow a lot of time and a lot of space to be able to pursue what they want to. And those things can also count as your quote unquote general education. Nobody says that it doesn't count as science. So my youngest is he wants to get his drone pilot license. There is so much science and math and there's so much to that. So it's not like it's just an elective. I'm like, that really can fit into so many different areas. And it doesn't have to be just completely pigeonholed. And now on his transcript, I listed it as an elective because I already had him do some other sciences and some other maths. But just really spending time on giving them exposure to different areas and letting them decide how far they want to go on it, and then introducing them possibly to people to do internships or apprenticeships and just going further so that when they graduate, it's not like they're suddenly like the doors open up and they're walking into a world that they don't know. It's letting them just move from one phase to another phase, whether that is higher education or whether that is to taking a gap year or whether that is to getting a job or whatever it is, a trade school, whatever it is they want to do. They just feel comfortable, just like, "Okay, I'm done with my formal education with my mom and everything. So I'm just going to move on to the next thing." And they feel equipped. So just spending a lot of time out in the world and letting them um, see you in the world. I know that's kind of maybe a different point, but just like living life together also, I would include in that. I mean, I could go on about high school forever. It's kind of become like one of my favorite subjects, not because I'm in the trenches
Oh,
of it right now. So
I
yeah.
love that
So
perspective.
thank
I,
you.
I love that.
What would you add to that?
Yeah, so I was just gonna say, we chatted a little bit before we hit record, and I was sharing how it feels bittersweet to see your kids growing up. And I was telling you how, if you've got two graduated and then the one in high school, and I'm like, how I've already thought about that and just kind of like felt all these bittersweet feelings. But it's so encouraging to hear all that you had to share about that and just watching them grow and watching them springboard into the things that they love and watching them learn even more and just deeply, and then you asking them questions about it. And I think you brought up a really important point there for us to sit and actually listen to our kids, and especially our high school age kids as they are pursuing these interests. I don't know that there's anything in the world that means more to our kids than intentional time with their parents from their parents. A lot of parents don't take the time to sit and actually listen to their kids share from their heart, and to be able to connect with them in that way is a gift. It's a huge gift to our kids. And I think that it really will build that relationship with them even deeper. And so I think that's great because you really hit on that. And I can tell that you're doing that with your kids. And I'm just on the front end of experiencing that. So my oldest, my daughter is 16, and she has recently became really interested in homesteading and natural health. We started chicken keeping, and then she on her own launched into sourdough and rendering tallow and making kombucha and all these things that are so far beyond, my skill set. And so it's really been a treat to see that unfold and see her excited about that. And she's planning to go off to Bible college, but really she wants to be a homemaker. She wants to be a homeschool mom. And so to see her just developing these skills, and I think about other things like hospitality. She serves at our local cafe, and she's part of the worship team with our youth group. And so just to see these things as she's growing up and coming, into her own, and knowing that whatever she ends up doing, whatever she ends up being, that she's going to have these, skills like hospitality and homemaking and all these things that are going to serve her really well, no matter what she ends up doing. So I think life skills, that was kind of the thing that I wanted to touch on, was that these years are so wonderful to be able to teach our kids important life skills like cooking and cleaning, entrepreneurship, the trades. I love that with homeschool, there's not this stigma that you graduate and then you have to go off to college. Like, I feel like that stigma is very much there with the public school. Like, it's expected. It's just what you do. It's how it's always been. And that's great if that's what our kids want to do. And I imagine that part of my kids, that will be their path. I imagine that for one or two of my kids, they'll launch into entrepreneurship or possibly a trade school. My husband and I are entrepreneurs, and I see them, that piquing their interest. So just equipping them with life skills, communication skills, things that they need to be able to write a check and pay their taxes, and have insurance on their car, and just how to be able to do those things. That's not being taught in the public school system. Things like scrambling an egg. I mean, our kids need to know how to do that. My 10-year-old cooked his own breakfast this morning. He made scrambled eggs in a toast hole. And it's just so fun to see them doing these real life things that they're going to need to know to be productive, honorable, respectful, successful adults. And so it's such a gift to be able to do that with them. The other thing that I wanted to touch on for high school years is just the possibility and the opportunity, if it's for you and your kids, to be able to dual enroll in college. So again, every child is going to take a different path. My daughter is actually looking at dual enrolling her junior and senior year so that she actually graduates with her associate's college degree. I don't ever want to rush the process. I want to allow our kids to be kids and enjoy all the ages and the stages. But she wants to go have that college experience for a couple of years, just simply to have that experience at a Bible college. And that's great. And I'm thinking, if she wants to go do that for a couple years, why not come out of that experience with her bachelor's degree? So we'll go into it with her associate's degree. So just having that opportunity to navigate things like that, or like the pilot's license, or, trade school or apprenticeships. It's so awesome that they get to do that with homeschool. It's just very different than the public school setting. And so I'm very grateful for that. Do you have any more thoughts on high school, or any last thoughts on any of the ages and stages, Leigh?
I just want to say I love those stories of your kids. And I think that between you and I, that will encourage the moms to realize that we can say create an individualized homeschool in elementary school and middle school a little bit. And it just is like, what does that look like? But high school, you really get to do it and really look at what are they interested in. So you saying your daughter wants to do dual enrollment, and I second the dual enrollment. It was a great experience. My daughter did a lot more classes than my sons did. And my my older son, he actually graduated a year early from homeschool high school because he did some dual enrollment. So he could get all of the credits that he needed in order to complete that for the state. So that was a good resource. And so I love that she wants to do that because that's what she wants to do. And we get this opportunity, and it sounds scary to a lot of moms, especially if you're pulling a child home in the middle school or high school years. You're like, what? I thought there's just this path that they're supposed to take. You go to, if you're in public school, are you going to do the college track or not the college track? And that's pretty much what you get to choose. You might have some choices in between there, or how high of math you want to go to. Not that you have to get to trigonometry or calculus, but if a homeschool child wants to, then go ahead. But if they just want to do the basic math, do a little bit of algebra, do consumer math, that's okay too. We don't all have to know the same exact things. But I try to think about all of my adult friends, and we all have different interests and we all know different things. And so to expect that all kids are going to graduate homeschool, high school at the same knowledge level for everything is kind of silly. It's a waste of time, honestly, I think, when we could just pour into our kids and figure out what exactly in creating what that looks like for them. It's going to look very different. And it sounds like your kids are all going to look very different. And I second that life skills, because I just think back to my own, excuse me, I think back to my own school time, and finally left college, and I didn't know how to do some of those basic things. And imagine if I did, I would have felt confident that I could cook my own meals instead of trying to get a job and trying to get an apartment, didn't even know how to balance a budget, and trying to figure out how to grocery shop and how to cook my own meals. If I already knew all that, getting the job and being on my own would have been a lot easier. So I love that you mentioned the life skills, and we get to do that with them. And then if they, sometimes you can feel like, do you mess up with life skills? The kids like, well, I said the wrong thing to the bank teller. Who cares? I say the wrong thing to people all the time. And what could you have said? So that's beautiful. And I second all of that. That's wonderful.
It is. It's such a gift. It is such a precious, good life. I feel like I gush. We're headed into year 3, but in some ways, I feel like we've been here forever. I guess in my heart, just pouring into the kids and teaching them those core values and the things that are important, and just really desiring to raise them up to be a good human being, a human being who knows how to be respectful and honorable and productive, out in the real world. I think, like, as moms, what more could we want than that? And it's a gift. So as we come to a close today, let's each share where everybody can find us. Leigh, you want to go first?
Sure. So I am at Little by Little Homeschool, and you can find me on any podcast app, whatever you're listening to right now. You can just search for Little by Little Homeschool, but the hub of everything you can find at littlebylittlehomeschool.com.
I love it. And I am, again, host of the Joy at Home podcast. You can find that on all the listening platforms. And you can also find me over at teachme2homeschool.com. I have a free curriculum guide that you can download over there. So that's where you can find me. Well, Leigh, it's been so fun to co-host today. This is sort of becoming one of my favorite things to do. I did an episode with Kelsey Sorensen a few episodes back. I don't know if you're familiar with her, but she's a joy, and we co-hosted. And I think it's great when homeschool moms come together and share our hearts and share our ideas. And it's been a joy to do that with you today. So thank you for teaming up with me and for sharing with all of our listeners today.
Yes, thank you for chatting with me too. This has been a really fun experience. It's been fun to connect with you too, and your podcast is such a blessing. And the fact that you guys are homeschooling is a great testament to, sometimes, often it's in our hearts already, and just something kind of pushes us to do that. So I'm excited to continue to watch your journey of homeschooling your kids.
Yes. Well, thank you again, Leigh. It has been so fun to hear all your wisdom as you're just a few steps ahead. And it's just, yeah, it's been wonderful. Everybody go check out both podcasts, both Leigh's podcast and mine. We would love to see you on either show. We'd love to help you out on your journey. And for now, we're going to go ahead and sign off with joy.